So I finally finished the latest season of The Flash. That means it's time to stop and rank all 4 seasons of The Flash from the worst to the best. Now, before I give you my ranking, go ahead and tell me yours down below in the comment section. Tell me which ones you love, which ones you hate. And if you strongly disagree with me, don't just tell me that you hate me. Tell me why you disagree with me. Tell me why you love or hate something that I had the opposite opinion on, because why we think something is a lot more interesting than just what number we put next to things. Now, before I dive into my ranking of the 4 seasons of The Flash, there's actually a 5th season of The Flash from back in the year 1990 starring John Wesley Shipp. Now, this is the Flash TV show that I grew up watching. When the pilot aired, I recorded it on a VHS tape. I recorded it over my mom's copy of Flashdance, which she wasn't too happy about. Now, I couldn't rank this along with the other ones because I haven't rewatched the full season recent enough to be able to rank it properly, but I can talk about the series just a little bit, and there's a lot of things about it that are great. The music is excellent. They had Danny Elfman write a score for it, and Shirley Walker then composed it for the episodes, and it's like orchestrated music. So the score, the themes throughout all the episodes, excellent, excellent stuff. The costume looks great from most angles. A couple angles it looks too obvious where the padded muscles are. It's a little bit too exaggerated, but in general, it's a very cool looking costume that they spent some money on to design it. Mark Hamill's Trickster is a little bit like a prototype for his Joker. Now, the costume looks ridiculous. It looks campy. It looks dated, but the performance he gives has certainly led into what he did with the Joker just a year or two later on. And the pilot for this show is actually quite good. The one I recorded on that VHS tape that I watched constantly on repeat back in the day, it's very well done. It's essentially a 90-minute Flash origin story TV movie, and I think it's pretty well done and ages quite well. Unfortunately, the rest of the season doesn't really keep up the quality of that original TV movie. It gets a lot campier. There's a bunch of very silly plot lines and a number of cringe-worthy moments.
Hey, let's go! You ready to rock?
And just the special effects weren't at a place where there was very many tricks that they could do with his speed, and so a lot of things started getting repeated very quickly. I would recommend checking out that original pilot TV movie and then the episodes with Mark Hamill. There's a couple good ones sprinkled in there, but in general, I wouldn't really recommend the entire season. With that said, let's dive into our ranking. Coming in last place is going to be Season 3. Now, while it's in last place, I still had fun with it. It was still watchable, and I would say that this season is better than the weaker seasons of Arrow. The reason I put it in last place is because there were several missteps with the storylines that I think robbed a lot of the potential for the season, as well as kind of sucked some of the fun and joy out of the show in general. Problem number 1 is they totally wasted the Flashpoint storyline. So this was a major plot line in the comic books. They made an animated film out of it just a few years back. This is a very cool storyline in the Flash universe that has so much potential for storytelling and interesting directions to take it, and they played the storyline out in one episode. Like, he goes to the Flashpoint universe and we're back to normal by the end of the episode. There were so many directions they could have gone, so many things to explore, and they just undid it just like that. Now, the consequences of that play out throughout the rest of the season, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but I wish they would have spent more time in Flashpoint. Issue number 2 is the Arrow problem, where everyone ends up becoming a superhero. So we got Cisco gaining powers, Caitlin becomes Killer Frost, Wally becomes Kid Flash. Suddenly everyone is a superhero and a part of the team, and I don't think that does the show any favors at all, because it stops being special for someone to be a superhero if just by chance all of their friends and family also become superheroes. And it loses some of the dynamic of the show where certain characters are normal, certain characters have a normal life, and they don't have anything to do with the Flash superhero team. And that gives contrast in the show. For me, when everyone has superpowers, is on the superhero team, the show loses something and feels a lot more monotonous. So I really don't like it when these shows head in that direction. Third issue is that Barry is brooding the entire season. And that one of the appeals of the show to me was that it was a fun contrast to Arrow, just so lighthearted. And that was the charm, the appeal of the show. And then they do the Flashpoint storyline, and everyone's mad at him for messing up the timeline and all the consequences that go along with it. So it adds this tension into it that takes the fun out of it, because you just feel the conflict in all the scenes. And then as you move into the second half of the season and he knows that Iris is going to die, he's just so desperate to save her, like, I've got to save her, that he's brooding once again over what's going on. And then we have the Savitar reveal, and it just adds another heavy layer to what's going on in the plot line that doesn't have the charm to it that I want in this show. So it's just too heavy for this particular show. Fourth issue with the season is they went with another speedster with Savitar, and so it just felt a little bit monotonous in the direction that they went with things. It was highly serialized. There was just a lot of these plot lines all about Savitar. We got to stop Savitar. How are we going to stop Savitar? What's Savitar up to? And I just don't think that worked well for the plot. It felt monotonous. It felt like we were repeating things like, are we moving forward? Why are we stuck on this same plot line? And I think it also introduced a lot of time travel logic issues in the way it sort of played out, unfortunately. So it was very frustrating. And one final thing about the season that really disappointed me was the episode Duet. So they did a musical episode with the Music Meister showing up. I was so excited for this episode because my kids love the Music Meister episode of Batman the Brave and the Bold. I've watched the episode.
Yes, I'm the Music Meister, and I'm here to settle the score.
Way too many times for a grown man, and in my car listened to the soundtrack way too many times. And then the episode, they did kind of this set period piece episode with it, and it just didn't have anything that was interesting to do. It was like the least interesting direction to go with a musical episode for The Flash. So unfortunately, this season for me comes in last place. Still like watchable, still fun, but weakest season for me. Coming in third place is going to be season 4. Now, coming off the previous season, they tried to course correct. At least that's what it felt like to me. And in that, they went for a much more lighthearted season, and they also had a lot more episodic episodes, Freak of the Week episodes. And I thought that was, for the most part, a good direction to go to crank up the fun. At times, it felt like maybe they went too far in the direction of fun, and it kind of veered into the camp category when you've got, a villain whose power is having good luck. A little bit silly. The fun actress that they cast in her got a little bit silly. Elongated Man gets a little bit exaggerated in where they go with some of that. Not a fan of the Council of the Wells, kind of at all, but it was good to return to this sense of fun, that they were trying to do things that were entertaining and not just sitting in this brooding state all of the time. The other thing I mentioned is this season went in a more episodic direction, especially the first half of the season. They have this bus scenario happen, so there's a whole new set of metas in the city, and we've got to stop these metas. And I thought they did a nice job of bringing that back. They tied it into the Mastermind's plan and brought them back in the second half of the season, so it all made sense as to why we had Freaks of the Week. They weren't just one and done. They came back. They had an important role that played out later on, so I liked the way a lot of that played out. Also liked that the main villain wasn't a speedster. They found a new direction to go with the main villain that's not just he's faster than Barry. No, they found something interesting with the Mastermind. Some of what they did with the Mastermind I thought was a little bit odd at times. The costume when he was in the full seat, headgear on and everything, I don't think that they were quite there on the design. It was close to being cool, but not quite. It always looked kind of off to me, and I didn't like it when they did the body swap stuff kind of later on, and he looked like different people at different times. I didn't like that aspect of it, but the idea of this guy that has a master plan and using a device to become smarter and trying to steal powers and lining all of these events up with domino effects, and Barry having to outsmart him by all sorts of ways that aren't trying to outsmart him. I dug that direction to add conflict, tension within the show. Add into the mix, you got a wedding episode that was nice. Towards the end, we get some nice teases to where they're going next season with a new character showing up. I dug all that, all the stuff with this new character. Just in case you haven't seen, I don't want to say too much about it. I dug all of that. In the finale, when they started to go in the direction of minds being linked together and going into heads, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to dig it, but I ended up going for it. And as my wife and I had all both kind of observed, they went for a very Matrix Reloaded type of finale to this episode. And normally I would not be down for that, but for some reason, it just kind of worked for me. Now, the reason this one is in third place is basically a lot of the stuff that I mentioned for season 3 in regards to everyone's a hero and everyone's part of the team. And I think the show just loses something when you do that. There's just not diversity. It all feels like we're hanging out at Star Labs all the time. And there's a certain implausibility to it when Iris is the captain of the team just because she's dating and then married to Barry. That doesn't feel right to me. It always felt off, like she's promoted because she's buddies with the Flash. I don't like that type of storytelling, and it's a weird thing to do with a character because it cheapens everything that she was outside of being on a team, and it sends the message, if you're not on the team, you're not important. And I don't think that's a particularly good message, and that's kind of what they did by this idea that we have to put her on the team. And so that's where it comes in last, but it just lost a little bit of the freshness and the dynamics of the show where you have these people that don't know who Barry is and they're not on the team, and the tension that comes with that was always a little bit more interesting to me. Our runner-up is going to be Season 2. Now, this is the show in full swing. Season 1 laid that foundation, and now they can build on top of it. And so a lot of that involved with this season, exploring the different Earths that they went with, the multiverse type stuff. And there's so much fun to be had when you go full sci-fi with the Flash and jumping universes and pulling characters and adding Harry Wells into the mix. All sorts of fun. And even you could get episodes where you go off to different Earths and see the different ways that these characters played out there. Loved all those aspects of the show. I dug the fact that we're bringing the different Flashes in from the different Earths into the mix and just having fun that you can have the different characters that they're not necessarily doing what happened in the comic books. We can do a version of that in certain different ways by having them show up. The way they tied this all together with these big twists, big reveals, who is Zoom, who's good, which heroes aren't really heroes, all that fun stuff. And I totally dug the mystery of who's in the mask, and the way it paid off in the end. I thought it worked out nice. I was worried, like, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to pay this off in a way that I dig that. Like, this feels like this is going to be a bait and switch, and once you reveal the answer, I'm going to be frustrated. And then they revealed the answer, and I was totally on board with it. I was like, that's clever. I like what you did there, both because of nostalgia from my childhood, because of the way it ties into certain storylines in this, and it just seems like a clever way to do this and to move forward. On the bad side, it was another speedster. And when you go from speedster to speedster, and then speedster again in third season, there's a certain freshness that gets lost in that. And you start repeating these ideas of Barry's just obsessed with going faster and must go faster. There's just like seasons 1 and 2. He's just, I just got to go faster. I just got to go faster. I got to go faster. That's very monotonous when you keep having this same exact plot point because you just went, here's a faster speedster. Not the best direction to go, especially when Zoom's trying to collect the powers from speedsters so he could just go faster. We're going way too Jeff Goldblum on this must go faster stuff.
Must go faster.
In this season. And also kind of towards the end of the season, they rehashed some of the parent stuff going on that I like where it paid off with the man in the mask reveal. I wasn't fully on board with kind of retreading a certain plot point. But these are just nitpicks. This was a great, fun season, and I debated heavily as to which one of these I wanted to put at 1 and which one of these I wanted to put at number 2. But coming Coming in first place is going to be season number 1. As I talked about over on my Arrow ranking, I am a sucker for an origin story and watching how that foundation gets built. That's the most interesting stuff normally for me, is watching characters become the hero, watching the team come together and discover how to work together. That's the stuff that I love the most. And this show was just such a fun addition to the Arrowverse and a nice counterpart to Arrow that's pretty serious as a show, very heavy as a show in general with brooding built into the mix. This one was the fun counterpart to that. I remember watching the pilot episode for the first time and thinking to myself, I'm actually laughing out loud. This is actually funny, and these characters have great rapport with each other. They came up with a nice way to do humor on this show that feels right and makes these characters pop. Also really appreciate the simplicity of season 1. We've got an origin story. We've got a team coming together. We've got the mystery of who the other speedster is. Joe and Barry are still spending lots of time as police officers. Iris is still writing lots of things. You see them in normal life. Barry has a crush on a girl. There's a simplicity to it that is very appealing to me to watch shows in this sort of state. I like it when people don't know who Barry is and he's having to find ways to interact with them without letting them in on the secret. That tension on these shows is always the more interesting time on them. Whether you go back to Smallville 10, 15 years ago, whether you talk about Arrow and now with The Flash, it's more interesting when people don't know who he is, but are the characters that don't know who he is, respect the Flash and things like that. I love those types of dynamics on these shows, and that's what you see in this season. In particular, Iris, this was when she was most interesting to me because she had this place in the show as the reporter that was kind of obsessed with the Flash and writing about him, but Barry likes her and she kind of likes the Flash, but she's also dating this other guy. These dynamics, that's the stuff that's fun and interesting to me. It gives her a role on the show that's interesting and distinct without needing to have superhero powers or be on the superhero team. And finally, with this season, the meta arc kind of running throughout the entire thing about Reverse Flash, that was handled really nicely with some twists, turns, reveals all throughout the season. It kind of built all along the way. You had the episodic ones about the different freaks from the accident showing up, but you're building all these pieces, putting the pieces of the puzzle together of who is this Reverse Flash until you get into that latter half of the second season where it goes full on. Barry has got to stop the Reverse Flash and stop this guy that was functioning as kind of a mentor to him, and you just feel the betrayal of all of that. Loved all those dynamics. So for me, because I love those origin stories, because I loved the cast, because I loved the simplicity and the dynamics of the characters, where there was that contrast of normal life and superhero life, for me, season 1 comes in first place. How about you? How do you rank the seasons of The Flash, and have you seen the old 90s show, or at least some of the episodes? Let me know your thoughts on that as well down in the comment section. Let's have a nice fun discussion about this very fun show. But if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos like this one that you're watching right now. But I don't want to just talk about movies and TV shows. I want to talk about them with you. So please join me down in the comment section. Let's have a nice, lively, yet respectful conversation about this show that we all love. That's why you're watching the video. So let's be fans that love each other and are kind to each other down below in the comment section. And as always, thank you for watching.